new orders that require me to go dark for at least a year, maybe more. A special assignment in an undisclosed location.
As an elite sniper, are you presently under any private or military contract?
No, there's not a lot of reasons for me right now.
What if I gave you a reason?
The Gorge. All right. So this movie, I, was interested in right off the bat because, you have Scott Derrickson, directing this, who I've liked a lot of his stuff in the past. You have, I think, Anya Taylor-Joy, who's quickly, I would say she's becoming one of my favorite actresses. I've liked her in everything I've seen her in. You have Miles Teller, which we'll see. I'll talk about that. But this movie interested me. And what you got here is, think of Romeo and Juliet. Two people who are supposed to be enemies, but they end up becoming in a romantic relationship. Think of Romeo and Juliet as two incredible sharpshooters that are protecting this area that is filled with rejected monsters that are something like Silent Hill meets The Last of Us. That's what you got here. And I watched this movie with some family, and I watched it with my father, because he was interested too. And when he said that it was like looking at like the fungus stuff from like The Last of Us mixed in with like creatures you would see in like a Silent Hill game, I was like, you nailed it. Like, that's it. That's what this is. And I really enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would, despite me listing off like, okay, it has a director I really like, Anya Taylor-Joy, she's really talented. Despite that, I was still kind of like, yeah, but I can also see how this can get screwed up. So I'm glad it didn't. So what you got here is Miles Teller plays a U.S. military guy, and Anya Taylor-Joy plays a Russian military woman. Or, not military, but like almost like assassin, like hitman kind of thing. And they are assigned the Gorge. Now, they're both on one side of this like giant gap, and they're instructed like, you can't talk to each other, you can't interact with one another, you can try to save them, but you can't like interact with them. And so they just go, you know what, screw that, let's, throughout the course of the movie they start to become buddies, and then they develop a romantic relationship, which, me personally, I'm not big into romance kind of stuff because they never do it either accurate or sweet enough. This one, worked for me. This one actually worked for me, which, I really liked. And this one has a lot of different genres bouncing off each other that normally when you look at, you would go, I don't know how this would work. You have romance in there, you have action, you have horror, you have comedy, and all those together, it sounds like too many cooks in the kitchen. But the way it's written works. It really works. Like, they found a way to balance all of those extremely well. Like, it knows when it's supposed to be, heartwarming. It knows when the action needs to kick. It knows when it's supposed to be scary. And it is scary. And it comes down to the atmosphere. It's very atmospheric. But yeah, when you see these, like, you see creatures and stuff, it's like, oh, that's not good. And very creepy atmosphere and tension all throughout it. Camera work I thought was great. I really enjoyed what they did. And I really like the score, but then again, it's Trent Reznor and his name, Atreus Ross. I'm sure that's wrong, but Nine Inch Nails does the score. So that's kind of cheating, because I really liked I really like Nine Inch Nails, and I've enjoyed the scores I've listened to from them. So that's kind of cheating. But Taylor-Joy and Teller work great together. They work great together. And a lot of it is when they're interacting with each other, there's really no dialogue. It's all like writing down sentences kind of thing. And it's like, that's really cool. So it feels very long distance, like a long distance relationship. So it almost feels like they act on their actions and their feelings instead of words. So that's what I really liked. It really worked. And like I said before, like I really like Taylor-Joy, and then Teller, can do some good things like Whiplash. And I actually really liked him in Top Gun Maverick. I didn't think I would, but he was actually good in that. But, he always seems to come off as like almost like a cocky douchebag. And, so that may be me. I don't know, but it was kind of like, you're actually, likable, and you're not playing this like douchebag stereotype that I've seen like you've always played. So it was a nice refresher. Now, it starts off kind of slow, but it picks up pretty quickly. Like I said, and besides, like, they need to take the time to like explain, like, okay, here's this, and then let the mystery ensue, and then we're going to continuously tell you what the mystery is as we go further. And there can also be some parts that throughout the movie that can be slow, but that's because like they're battling all these different genres. And so, like I said, like, if it's romance, it's probably going to be slow, but then it picks up with action, and it's like, oh, I'm listening again. And then I'll say this, the third act is really when the horror kicks in. It's the third act. It becomes an action horror film in the third act. You do get like a little bit of action in the second act, but that's mainly reserved for building up the dynamics of these characters and their relationship with one another. And then when in the third act, when shit hits the fan, you genuinely care for these people and you don't want them to die. And that they do that very well. I do think the CGI was a little too noticeable at times. And I was going like, I understand, like, yeah, you use CGI for this. But then there's some like shots that they linger on a special effect. But it wasn't like, I'm trying to find a good example. It wasn't like, oh my God. It was more like that didn't really work there, but okay, let's move on. This really, to like, overall, this feels like a two-person play for most of it. Yes, you do get, like, a couple people here and there, like Sigourney Weaver is the one who hires Miles Teller for this, which, despite the little role she has, she did do a good job. But it really feels like a two-person play. And it's a love story mixed with, like, The Last of Us and Silent Hill. And while I'll say this, it did feel like there was times where this could have been rated R, because it's PG-13, but they wanted to get a younger crowd in. I think mainly due to like the romantic elements of it, but I think it works, despite there being spots where I'm like, yeah, I think they could have pushed that like a little bit more. But I think Scott Derrickson was the best choice to direct this, from his action stuff, from stuff like Doctor Strange, and even parts of his VHS segment from, I think it was 85. There's a little bit of action going on there, to his horror stuff like Sinister, Black Phone. I think works. It was really, really cool, and this managed to take an old premise and turn it new again. It does have that, Romeo and Juliet feel to it, where it's like these people who aren't supposed to be friends, or they're supposed to be enemies. They're, they like each other. It takes that and says, okay, let's make them incredible sharpshooters, and let's throw, Silent Hill rejects in there. And it's like, that works. That works. So while I did have a few minor things I disliked, overall the Gorge is, I think, really creepy, entertaining, messed up as well. There's parts in there where I'm like, yeah, no, that's just screwed up. And a romantic action film that I think people should check out. So I personally give it a grade. And, like I said, I'm not super into romance films, but I really enjoyed what they did with this, and I recommend, if you want a nice, you want a romance film, but you also want something more to that, like you're feeling more action, or like sometimes like a little bit of like creepiness, like horror to it, this is a good one. I definitely recommend checking this one out.
This place is evil.